The night the fire swallowed the plantation, he did not run. He sat in the dirt, wrists bound by iron that glowed red against his skin, and watched the chains drip like wax. For the first time, the flames did not burn him, they freed him. The year was 1823, in the black heart of a Louisiana summer. The air was thick, humming with insects and the sour, sweet stench of molasses. On the Whitmore Plantation, men and women bent low beneath the lash of the overseer, their backs slick with sweat, their hands blistered from cane. Among them was Isaiah, a man who had long forgotten what it meant to stand tall. He was broad-shouldered still, his body carved from labor, but his spirit had been ground thin. The chains around his wrists and ankles were not just iron, they were years of humiliation, centuries of theft pressed into links. Each clink of the metal reminded him he was owned. At night, when others collapsed onto straw pallets, Isaiah stayed awake, staring at the ceiling beams of the slave quarters. He would whisper to himself in a language half-remembered from his mother, a tongue stolen from the coasts of Africa. He whispered not prayers, but promises. One day, fire will eat them. Fire had always haunted his dreams. Sometimes it came as a forest blaze, swallowing overseers whole. Sometimes it came as a single lantern, dropped carelessly, sparking a hunger that spread until the big house cracked and screamed. Isaiah did not fear fire. Fire was the only thing the masters feared more than their slaves. That night, when the moon hung sharp as a scythe, Isaiah sat with his back against the wooden post outside the quarters. His chains bit into his skin, cold and unyielding. He lifted his wrists and studied the way moonlight slid over the iron. He wondered what it would look like melting. He was still staring when the first scream split the night. The scream cut through the fields like a whip crack. For a moment, Isaiah thought it was only another nightmare, the kind that twisted his sleep and left him sweating. But then came the second scream, louder, closer, torn from a throat he recognized. Miriam. Isaiah jerked to his feet, the chains clattering around his ankles. The other slaves stirred in the quarters, some rising, others curling deeper into their rags, pretending not to hear. Pretending was survival. Screams at night were as common as cicadas. But Isaiah could not pretend. Miriam was just 16, a girl stolen from her mother's arms 2 winters ago and thrown into the house to scrub floors and empty chamber pots. She had a soft voice, but she sang when she worked, a fragile sweetness that reminded Isaiah of mornings before chains. She was the last spark of something human on this cursed plantation. He edged toward the window, peering out. The big house glowed faintly with lanterns. Shadows crossed behind the windows, shadows of men, of hands, of cruelty dressed in silk. Isaiah's jaw clenched. His wrists throbbed where iron gnawed at them. He wanted to tear through those walls, but the weight of his chains held him like an anchor. Behind him, old Samuel stirred. His beard was white, his back bent, but his eyes still carried the fire of another age. He had seen men whipped until their spines split. He had seen women buried alive in the fields for daring to flee. He had learned the hardest lesson. Silence kept you breathing. "Sit down, boy," Samuel rasped, his voice a cracked whisper. "Ain't nothing you can do but get yourself killed." Isaiah turned, teeth bared. "She's just a child." "And you're just a man with chains," Samuel shot back, his voice low but sharp. "You rush in there, they'll put your head on a pike by morning. Don't feed your fire to their cruelty." Isaiah wanted to snarl, to rage, but the truth in Samuel's words hit him like a lash. His strength meant nothing with iron eating his flesh. Still, the scream echoed in his chest, rattling around until it became something else. Not just grief, but fury. A vow. That night, when the lanterns finally dimmed and Miriam's sobs faded into silence, Isaiah lay awake again, staring at the beams. But his whispers changed. No longer promises, now plans. He spoke them into the dark, and though Samuel pretended to sleep, Isaiah knew the old man heard every word. Chains break. Fire eats. One day, Samuel, we burn this place to ash. And for the first time, the old man did not tell him to hush.
Morning came heavy with heat. The sky was a dull white, as if the sun itself had been scorched. By the time Isaiah and the others were herded into the cane fields, sweat already stung his eyes. The overseer, Mr. Carver, rode slow among them, his whip coiled like a serpent in his hand. He had a face that never smiled, only sneered, and when his eyes fell on Isaiah, the whip twitched as if eager. "Faster, boy," Carver snapped when Isaiah bent to cut the cane. "Don't think I don't see you dragging your feet." Isaiah muttered nothing, but his jaw tightened. He swung the blade hard, slicing through the stalks until his arms ached. Every lash of cane felt like another bone he longed to snap in Carver's body. But rage had to be swallowed. Out here, rage could get you killed before it ever bore fruit. By midday, the air shimmered. Miriam was in the fields now, her head bowed, her eyes swollen from the night before. She didn't sing anymore. She moved like a ghost, hands trembling with every stalk she touched. Isaiah's chest burned hotter than the sun. Something inside him cracked. It was no longer enough to dream of fire. Fire needed tinder. Fire needed hands to feed it. That evening, when the slaves were driven back to the quarters, Isaiah lingered near Samuel. The old man shuffled slowly, leaning on a crooked stick, but his eyes flicked sideways at Isaiah, sharp and knowing. "You carrying too much in your chest," Samuel muttered, barely moving his lips. "Weight like that gets a man buried." Isaiah bent low, as though adjusting his chains, and whispered back, "Or it gets him free." Samuel stopped. For a long moment he stared at Isaiah, the years of wisdom in his face warring with the fire in his eyes. Finally he shook his head and moved on, but Isaiah knew he had planted a seed. That night he whispered louder, not only to Samuel, but to the men who shared the dirt floor with him. Ezekiel, whose back bore more scars than skin. Ruth, whose baby had been sold south last winter. Young Caleb, only 13 but already strong enough to carry a man on his shoulders. He told them not of dreams, but of a night when the cane itself would burn, when the big house would fall, and when chains would melt in the fire. At first, silence met his words. Fear clung to their throats like dust, but silence was not denial. Silence was listening. Ezekiel was the first to nod. "If fire comes, I'll feed it." Ruth's hands shook as she clutched her knees. "He'll get us all killed." Isaiah's voice hardened. "We're already dead. Every day they take from us, one by one. I'd rather burn than rot." Caleb's young eyes gleamed. "I'll burn with you." Samuel, lying in the corner, exhaled slow. "You talk like a man ready to carry the weight of every soul here. You sure your shoulder's that strong, Isaiah?" Isaiah met the old man's stare. "I don't need shoulders. I need fire." For a long while, no one spoke. The night pressed down heavy, filled with the chirr of insects and the distant bark of dogs. Then Samuel closed his eyes and, in a voice as dry as parchment, he said, Fire eats, but fire don't choose. You set it loose, it'll take slave and master alike. Isaiah leaned back against the post, iron biting into his skin. His voice was steady, cold to steel. Then let it take. Better ashes than chains. And in that moment, the room shifted. The fear was still there, but so was something else. Something old, buried deep, now stirred awake. A hunger. The first spark.
The days that followed felt different. The same sun beat down. The same cane cut their hands. The same lash kissed their backs. But beneath it all, whispers moved like wind through the stalks. Isaiah carried those whispers. He spoke carefully, never to more than one or two at a time, never in the open, always with the watchful eye of Mr. Carver looming. At night, when the quarters groaned with tired bodies, his voice threaded through the dark. We ain't got weapons, but we got fire. They trust us with lanterns in the fields, with oil. One spark, and we turn night into judgment. Ezekiel nodded each time, his scarred back rigid with resolve. Caleb soaked in every word, too young to know the full price of rebellion, too young to care. Even Ruth, though fear clung to her, listened without turning away. But Samuel remained silent, and Isaiah knew silence could weigh heavier than words. The first move came in the smokehouse. Isaiah had been sent to haul barrels of salted pork, his chains rattling with every step. The air inside was thick with the smell of char and meat. In the corner, by the racks, he saw it. A half-empty jug of lamp oil left carelessly on the floor. His heart thudded, his palms slicked with sweat. One jug was nothing, but one jug could be everything. He glanced at the doorway. The overseer's voice barked outside, far off. With quick, silent hands, he dragged the jug behind a stack of barrels, covering it with burlap. His chains scraped against the floor, and the sound cut him like a blade. He froze, breath caught, listening. Nothing. Only the crackle of fat dripping onto coals. When he left the smokehouse, his face was calm, but inside he burned. That night, he whispered to Ezekiel and Caleb about the jug, their eyes lit like embers. But danger was always near. The next morning, as they bent to cut cane, Carver rode close. His eyes roamed over the slaves, sharp and suspicious. He reined his horse near Isaiah, studying him too long, as if he could smell the smoke on his skin. "You," Carver spat. "Stand up." Isaiah rose slowly, cane knife in hand. The sun flashed off the blade. For a heartbeat, he imagined driving it upward, splitting Carver's sneer wide open. His muscles coiled, every bone in his body ready. But not yet. Fire needed patience. Carver's eyes narrowed. "You been talking too much at night. Think I don't hear? My ears reach further than you know." Isaiah's heart pounded. Around him the other slaves froze, waiting. He lowered his gaze, forcing his voice steady. "Only talking to keep the young ones quiet, sir. You want rest, don't you?" For a moment, silence stretched thin. Then Carver barked a laugh, cruel and sharp. "Keep it that way. One word out of line, and I'll cut your tongue clean out." He snapped the whip near Isaiah's face. The crack split the air, close enough to sting his cheek. Then Carver spurred his horse and rode off, still laughing. Isaiah bent back to the cane, hands trembling. Sweat stung his eyes. He had been inches from ruin. But as he worked, the fury in his chest hardened into something unbreakable. Carver was right. His tongue was dangerous. His words were fire, and no whip could put them out. That night, as the quarters filled with the sound of labored breathing, Isaiah leaned close to Samuel. "You heard him. He knows. If we don't strike soon, he'll break us one by one." Samuel's eyes opened, two coals glowing in the dark. He studied Isaiah a long time before speaking. "You think you carryin' freedom in your hands, but freedom cut both ways. It take blood to pay for it." Isaiah did not look away.
then let blood flow. For the first time, Samuel did not argue. He only closed his eyes again and whispered, almost to himself, "Then the night must be chosen carefully. Fire don't forgive mistakes." And Isaiah knew the old man had stepped into the fire with him. The rebellion was no longer a dream, it was a clock ticking.
The air grew heavier with every passing day, as if even the sky sensed something stirring. The overseers barked louder, the lash fell quicker, the dogs seemed to prowl more restless. The Whitmore Plantation carried the smell of storm before lightning. Isaiah knew time was closing in. Carver's suspicion had been too sharp, his laughter too thin. Another week, maybe two, and they'd start searching the quarters, sniffing through the dark like hounds. If they found the jug of oil, the plan would burn out before it ever lit. So the night had to be chosen. It was Samuel who spoke first. That alone was enough to make the others listen. They were huddled close in the quarters, voices hushed so low they were almost breath. The younger ones pretended to sleep, but their ears strained in the dark. Samuel's voice cracked like old wood. "Harvest is coming to its end. They'll drink themselves stupid in the big house, celebrating their gold. That's the night." Isaiah nodded. His blood thrummed like a drum. "The master's drunk, the lanterns lit, the cane dry as tinder. We'll need no more than a spark." Ezekiel leaned forward, eyes like flint. "Where do we strike first, cane fields or the house?" "The cane," Isaiah said. "Let the fire grow its teeth there. The fields blaze, the air fills with smoke. While they panic, the house burns." Ruth shivered. Her hands twisted in her lap. "And what is it, children? They got little ones in that house, too." The silence cut deep. Isaiah closed his eyes for a moment. He could see them, small feet running through halls of stolen wealth, laughter echoing off walls built on broken backs. Innocent, yet tied by blood to cruelty. When he spoke, his voice was stone. "Chains don't ask us if we are children. Fire don't choose. Neither can we." Ruth wept softly, but said nothing more. Caleb's voice broke the silence, young and sharp. "What of Miriam? She in the house most nights, if the fire comes too quick." Isaiah's chest clenched. Miriam. Her song had been silenced, but her eyes still carried the memory of it. I could not bear the thought of her swallowed in the flames. "She'll know," Isaiah said firmly. "She'll be warned. The night we choose, I'll see her free of that house before the first spark is struck." Samuel grunted, heavy and tired. "You taken the heaviest chain on yourself, boy. Don't stumble under it." Isaiah's voice held no doubt. "Better to stumble in fire than stand forever in chains." The days crawled toward harvest's end. Isaiah moved like a shadow, slipping into the smokehouse to check the jug, whispering to Miriam when no eyes were near. She listened in silence, her hands trembling, her eyes wet. "They'll kill us all if they know," she whispered. "They kill us every day," Isaiah answered. "This way, we choose the day." And though her lips quivered, she nodded. The night of choosing came clear and hot. The moon was a thin blade in the sky, clouds hanging low like smoke already gathering. In the big house, laughter spilled through the windows. The masters and their guests feasted, drunk on wine and profit. Fiddles screeched, boots stomped, voices roared. In the quarters, silence reigned. Every man and woman lay still, eyes open, waiting. Isaiah's heart thundered. He could feel the moment like a living thing pressing against his skin. Tonight,
the world would change or end. He looked at Samuel, who lay with eyes closed, lips moving in silent prayer, at Ezekiel, who sharpened a blade stolen from the cane shed, at Caleb, trembling but smiling, hungry for fire, at Miriam, her face pale in the dark, but her gaze steady on his. Isaiah rose, the iron biting his wrists. It's time. And with those words, the fire that had lived only in whispers became real.
The night lay heavy, the air thick as syrup, cicadas screaming in the trees. From the big house came bursts of laughter, the clatter of goblets, the squeal of a fiddle played too hard. The masters drank deep, celebrating their harvest, blind to the storm crouched in the dark. Isaiah crouched by the quarter's doorway, chains coiled at his feet like a serpent ready to strike. In his chest, his heart hammered hard enough to shake the earth. He drew in a breath and tasted the scent of roasting meat and spilled wine drifting from the house. He knew he'd never smell those things again without thinking of fire. Around him, the others lay in feigned sleep, but their eyes flickered open when he moved. Caleb's lips were pressed into a line of determination. Ezekiel's scarred hands flexed, itching for the knife hidden beneath straw. Ruth clutched her arms, whispering prayers into her palms. And Samuel watched with eyes that had seen too much. He gave Isaiah a single nod, nothing more, but enough to say, "The fire is yours now. Carry it well." Isaiah's first step was to Miriam. She was inside the house, cleaning up after the feasting, her chains lighter but no less cruel. She had begged to be warned, and Isaiah had promised. He would not let her burn with them. He slipped from the quarters, his chains muffled by rags wrapped around his ankles. The moon was thin, shadows deep. Every step felt louder than thunder, every rustle of cane a scream. He crossed the yard, heart racing, keeping low as a hound. He knew the patrols, their paths, their habits. He had studied them, night after night. Tonight their eyes were dulled by liquor, their steps lazy. Still, when one of them shifted suddenly, Isaiah froze, breath locked in his throat. The guard leaned against a post, flask in hand, muttering to himself. Isaiah slid past, silent as smoke. At the back of the big house, he found Miriam through a cracked window. She was bent over a basin, scrubbing goblets, her face pale in the lamplight. When her eyes lifted and met his, she stilled, the cloth slipping from her hands. Isaiah pressed a finger to his lips. She nodded once, her throat working. He whispered through the crack, barely more than breath. "When the music stops, slip out, head for the cane shed. Ezekiel will wait." Her lips trembled, but she whispered back, "And you?" Isaiah's voice was iron. "I'll be the spark." For a heartbeat, fear drowned her eyes, but then she nodded, her shoulders squaring. A child no more. Tonight she was steel.
Isaiah slid back into the dark toward the smokehouse. His palms were slick with sweat as he touched the burlap covering the jug of oil. It was still there, heavy and waiting. He hefted it, feeling the liquid slosh inside. Every step back toward the quarters felt like carrying thunder. If Carver or any guard saw the jug in his hands, it was over. Not just for him, for everyone. He passed the stables. A horse shifted, snorting, hooves scraping. Isaiah froze,
body pressed against the wall, every nerve screaming. A guard's voice slurred nearby, singing off-key. Boots crunched in the dirt, drawing closer. Isaiah gripped the jug tighter. If he was caught, he would smash it against the man's skull, damn the noise. His muscles coiled, ready. The boots stumbled, staggered, then turned away, fading into the night. The singing grew fainter. Isaiah's breath escaped in a silent rush. He slipped back toward the quarters, every step sharper now. When he entered, the eyes of his people locked on him. He set the jug down in the center of the dirt floor. The lamplight caught it, gleaming like a captured sun. Caleb whispered, awed, "That's it. That's freedom in a bottle." Isaiah knelt, his voice low but burning. "Tonight, when the fiddles stop and the masters sleep drunk, the fields will blaze. From there, the house." Samuel shifted, his voice heavy. "Once the spark is struck, there's no turning back, not for any of us." Isaiah's gaze swept the room. Fear shone in their eyes, but so did fire. "No turning back," he echoed. Outside, the fiddle screeched one last tune. Inside, the jug of oil sat waiting, heavy with promise. It was the last quiet night the Whitmore Plantation would ever know.
The night ripened slowly, thick with heat and dread. The air clung heavy to the skin, as if the earth itself held its breath. From the big house, the laughter had softened. The fiddle still wailed, but its strings sagged, its notes turning sour with drink. The sound of boots stomping was slower now, clumsy. The quarters lay in silence. No one slept. They stared at the jug of oil in the dirt as though it were alive. Every sound carried weight. The scrape of Ruth's hands against her knees, the slow creak of Ezekiel shifting his scarred shoulders, the faint rattle of Caleb's chains as he tried to still his trembling legs. Even Samuel's breathing sounded like thunder. Isaiah sat apart, his back against the post, chains biting deep into his wrists. His eyes never left the jug. In his mind, he could already see the flames licking the cane, crawling fast, greedy, devouring everything. He could almost hear the crackling, the screams, the collapse of timber. But the waiting was worse than the fire itself. Miriam had not yet returned from the house. Each minute stretched into a blade, cutting deeper into Isaiah's chest. He imagined her caught, questioned, whipped for glancing too long at the wrong window. He imagined her locked in the pantry while the fire swallowed the walls around her. He pushed the thoughts down, but they clawed back up, relentless. Samuel must have read it on his face, because his voice rumbled low from the corner. "Patience, boy. Storm don't come faster by shouting at the sky." Isaiah's jaw tightened. "But storms don't have girls in 'em." The old man sighed, closing his eyes again. "She'll come, or she won't. Either way, the fire waits for no soul." A dog barked outside, sharp and sudden. Everyone froze. Ezekiel's hand went to the blade hidden in straw. Caleb sucked in a hiss of air. The barking grew closer, claws scraping the dirt. Then came the sound of boots, heavy and staggered, a man muttering curses under his breath. Isaiah's blood turned to ice. The door to the quarters creaked open, lantern light spilling in. Carver stood there, his whip looped at his side, his eyes red with drink but sharp enough to cut. He scanned the room, the faces staring back at him, the bodies tense in false stillness. His gaze lingered on Isaiah, then drifted to the floor, where the jug of oil sat in plain sight, half-shadowed by straw. Isaiah's heart slammed. Every soul in the room seemed to stop breathing. Carver squinted, his lip curling. "What's this, then? You all sitting up like ghosts in the dark? Too much work make you forget how to sleep?" No one answered. The silence stretched thin, ready to break. Carver sniffed, spat on the floor, and snorted, "Bah! Let the devil keep you awake then." He swung the door shut so hard the walls rattled, and his boots staggered away into the night. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Caleb exhaled, shaking. He saw it. "No," Isaiah said hard but low. "He was too drunk to see the floor beneath his own boots. But next time, we won't be so lucky." The room remained thick with fear, yet beneath it, something else thrummed stronger now. They had stared death in the eye and had not been taken. The fire had not been extinguished, it had only grown hungrier. Hours passed. The fiddle faltered, then fell silent. Laughter turned to slurred arguments, then to snores. The dogs curled quiet. The night became still. And then at last the back door of the big house creaked open. Miriam slipped into the dark, her small frame moving quick as shadow. She darted across the yard, the moon catching her face just long enough for Isaiah to see. Her lips pressed tight, but her eyes steady. She had chosen. When she reached the quarters, Isaiah met her at the door, catching her trembling hands in his. "It's time," she whispered. Isaiah nodded. His voice was calm now, iron wrapped in fire. "Yes, the world burns tonight."
The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of oil and dry cane. Isaiah knelt by the jug, heart pounding like a drum, palms slick with sweat. Caleb and Ezekiel crouched beside him, eyes wide, muscles taut. Miriam stood just behind, silent but unwavering. Isaiah lifted the rag covering the jug, inhaling the sharp, heavy scent. This was no longer a plan in whispers, it was a promise in liquid form. He poured the oil along the base of the cane rows nearest the quarters, careful, deliberate. Every movement counted, every sound could be the last they made. Caleb whispered, "It's ready." Isaiah nodded. He struck a flint, sparks dancing like fireflies. The first one caught, flickering, uncertain. Then the oil drank the flame greedily, hissing, snaking along the dry stalks. A crackle, sharp and sudden, split the night. The cane caught fire almost instantly, the flames leaping like wild beasts. Shadows danced across the plantation, painting the night in orange and black. Smoke spiraled upward, thick and choking, carrying the stench of molten iron and drying sugar cane. Isaiah felt a thrill unlike anything before. Power, rage, and freedom coiled together in his chest. He turned to see Caleb and Ezekiel grinning, Ruth pressing her hand over her mouth to stifle a sob of awe. Miriam clutched his arm, wide-eyed but steady. "Isaiah." "Now the house," Isaiah said, voice low but cutting through the roar of flames. They moved quietly toward the big house. Every step was measured. The guards were drunk, the doors and windows carelessly latched, the night heavy with complacency. A lantern spilled light over the steps, and Isaiah's hands tightened on the jug. One careful toss, one crack of flame, and the oil drank the timber greedily. The fire hissed, clawing up the walls, windows shattered under the heat, a roar of panic spilling into the yard. Screams erupted from the house, mingling with the snap of burning wood. Horses neighed, dogs barked, and the masters stumbled out, wild-eyed, tripping over each other in confusion. Isaiah watched them from the shadows, chains chafing against his skin, and felt something melt inside him, not the iron, but the weight of years, centuries, oppression. The fire spread fast, consuming the cane rows first, then leaping to the outbuildings, the stables, and finally the big house.
Smoke stung their eyes, but they moved through it, herding those they could, the few who could be saved, toward the safety of the marshes beyond the plantation. Ezekiel laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "We did it! The bastards burn!" Miriam clutched close to Isaiah. "And we survive?" she asked, voice trembling. Isaiah did not answer immediately. His eyes followed the inferno, watching shadows of men claw at the flames, their screams rising, mixing with the crackle of wood and cane. "Survive," he said finally, "and watch our chains melt." Somewhere in the darkness, Samuel leaned on his stick, eyes fixed on the fire. A low chuckle escaped him, hoarse but full of something Isaiah had not heard in years: relief. Finally, the fire remembers what it owes. And in the night, as the flames climbed higher, Isaiah felt it too. The chains were gone, not entirely, not yet, but their power had melted away. For the first time, the world was not their cage. It was theirs to shape, even if only from the ashes.
By the time the first hints of dawn stretched pale fingers across the horizon, the Whitmore Plantation was unrecognizable. Smoke hung thick, curling like serpents over the cane fields. The air burned with the scent of charred wood and iron, the screams of those trapped in the house echoing faintly like a nightmare refused to end. Isaiah stumbled through the smoke, chains scraping his wrists, not from iron, but from the memory of them, now burned into his skin. Miriam clung to him, her small frame trembling, eyes wide at the inferno, devouring everything. Ezekiel and Caleb moved like shadows, helping Ruth and others guide the few remaining slaves toward the marshes. Samuel's slow steps lagged behind, but his eyes never left the fire, as if memorizing the destruction to carry its lesson with him. From the house, Carver's screams tore through the night. He staggered out, his clothes smoldering, eyes wild with terror. Behind him, guests and overseers were trapped or fleeing in disarray. Horses bolted, gates splintered under hooves, lanterns toppled into the fire. Isaiah paused, watching the man who had tormented them for years claw at the ground, shrieking. There was no satisfaction in the scream itself. It was too raw, too human. But in the knowledge that the power had shifted, that fear now belonged to them, not the other way around, Isaiah felt a strange surge of victory. Ruth covered her mouth. It's happening." "Yes," Isaiah said, voice low, steady, trembling only slightly. "The world is turning." By mid-morning, the flames had consumed the big house completely. The cane fields were blackened stubble, smoke curling up like victory banners. Some of the surviving overseers had fled, limping toward the river, their wealth, their pride, everything lost to fire and ash. In the quiet between crackles of burning wood, the slaves gathered. Their faces were streaked with soot, sweat, and tears, but their eyes burned. Isaiah looked over them, Miriam, Ruth, Caleb, Ezekiel, Samuel, and knew that, even in destruction, life had returned to them. For the first time, they were not running. They were moving forward. The fire had burned more than wood. It had burned chains, burned fear, burned centuries of subjugation into ash. And while the flames would fade, the memory of power, their own hands shaping fate, would remain. Samuel, leaning on his stick, finally spoke, voice low and firm. "The world owes no one mercy, boy, but tonight it owes us remembrance.
Never forget how it feels to hold the fire. Isaiah nodded, looking toward the river, the marshes beyond, the horizon unbroken. The chains were gone, and with them the weight that had pressed on his soul for years. The Whitmore Plantation was gone, its masters scattered like frightened rats. And Isaiah, for the first time, could taste the sharp, sweet tang of freedom.
The dawn rose over a blackened horizon. Smoke still drifted from the smoldering cane fields, curling like restless spirits, but the immediate danger had passed. The Whitmore Plantation, once a bastion of cruelty, was now nothing more than ash, ember, and memory. Isaiah stood at the edge of the marsh, chains long gone, scarred wrists raised slightly as if to feel the wind carry away the remnants of his bondage. Beside him, Miriam clutched his hand, silent but present, her eyes reflecting both fear and triumph. Ezekiel, Caleb, Ruth, and Samuel lingered nearby, each bearing the marks of the night, burns, cuts, and the heaviness of witnessing terror unfold. Yet, despite the scars, each face carried something that had not existed before: freedom. The slaves moved quietly through the marsh, careful, alert. Every shadow could be a guard seeking revenge, every sound a reminder that the world beyond the plantation still belonged to others. Yet, with each step, they felt lighter, unbound by chains, physical or invisible. Isaiah paused to look back once. Through the smoke and haze, the ruins of the big house glowed faintly, the last timbers collapsing in on themselves. Somewhere inside, he imagined the iron chains he had worn for years melting in the fire, dripping like molten wax, vanishing into nothing. "They'll rebuild," Ezekiel muttered, voice low, "and they'll remember what we did." Isaiah nodded. "Let them remember, but we move forward, not backward, not chained by fear anymore." Miriam's voice broke the silence. "What now?" Isaiah looked at the horizon, where the river met the sky, silver and endless. "Now we live. Now we are more than what they said we were. Now we decide what the world will be for us." Samuel leaned on his stick, eyes still heavy with years and sorrow, but a faint smile touched his lips. "And the fire," he said quietly, "will always remember. It knows your heart, Isaiah. It knows when chains are broken." Isaiah closed his eyes, feeling the heat and light of that night still pulsing in his chest. The chains were gone, fully gone, and with them the fear, the pain, the centuries of oppression. He breathed deep, feeling each inhale as a claim, each exhale as a release. For the first time, he was truly free. In the distance, the last tendrils of smoke rose and curled, as if carrying the memory of chains into the sky. Isaiah opened his eyes and smiled, a slow, quiet smile. The fire had done more than burn buildings. It had melted every last chain in his mind and soul. And for the first time in his life, Isaiah walked unbound into the rising sun.